Communications with the Agalarovs following Miss Universe Moscow. On November 19, 2013, Donald Trump Jr. emailed Emin Agalarov to introduce him for the first time. Trump Jr. wrote that he had spoken to his father about working with the Agalarovs to develop a Trump Tower or hotel in Moscow, and that his father had asked him to reach out to Emin and Aris Agalarov to discuss moving forward. Later that day, Emin Agalarov replied and said, quote, "Let's speak and see if we can make things happen," close quote. On November 20th, Emin Agalarov wrote to Trump Jr. in hopes that Trump Jr. would remind his father to tweet a link to Agalarov's new music video, which featured Donald Trump. Trump Jr. replied that he would, and wrote that he would be calling, quote, "shortly to discuss the potential tower," close quote. Later that day, Donald Trump tweeted a link to Emin Agalarov's video. On November 21, 2013, Emin Agalarov sent an email to Donald Trump Jr. and copied Shugart and Goldstone. The subject line of Agalarov's email was, quote, "President," close quote. And in the body of the email, Agalarov wrote, quote, "My father just received a letter and gift for your dad from Mr. Putin," close quote. Agalarov attached images of the gift, which was a Fedoskino-style lacquer box, as well as images of the letter from Putin. Trump Jr. appeared to have passed the email and photographs on to his father. The report includes a photocopy of the letter from Agalarov to Trump Jr. It reads, "Dear Don, my father just received a gift for your dad from Mr. Putin. I'm sending all this with my mom, who is flying early next week, and either Rob or Paula will make sure you guys get it shortly. In the meantime, here are some pictures. Thank you, Emin." To which Donald Trump Jr. added a handwritten note, "Dad, see attached from Emin. You are being sent a gift from Putin, ! Don." End of letter. The committee also included images of the box and the letter from Putin and were attached in the report. The unofficial English translation of the letter that was included states, "Dear Mr. Trump, I would like to congratulate you and your colleagues on successfully holding the Miss Universe contest in Moscow. I hope that all the participants in this remarkable event will go home with good memories of their visit to the Russian capital. It is a pity that we were not able to have our meeting, but I hope we will be able to talk during one of your upcoming visits to Russia. Yours sincerely, V. Putin." The package with the box from Putin was brought to the United States by Irina Agalarov, Aris Agalarov's wife. Joint Real Estate Development Effort in Moscow, 2013-2014. Shortly after the Miss Universe pageant, discussions began between the Agalarovs Crocus Group and the Trump Organization about a joint real estate development project. Goldstone told the committee that Emin Agalarov believed that Trump's initial reaction to being shown possible sites in Moscow during the Miss Universe contest was positive. As noted, at Trump's suggestion, on November 19, 2013, Donald Trump Jr. reached out to Emin Agalarov regarding a possible joint development project in Moscow. On November 22nd, Emin Agalarov wrote to Trump Jr. stating, quote, "I've spoken to my father about our conversation, and all looks very positive. General terms are suitable for a negotiation. Let's identify the land and building, we have a few options, and get the ball rolling contractually," close quote. In the interim, Emin Agalarov suggested an exclusivity arrangement. On November 27th, Yulia Klushina emailed Emin Agalarov, Rob Goldstone, Artem Klyushin, and others to inform them that Trump had written about the Agalarovs on Twitter and had posted a link to an article about Emin Agalarov's new music video, which Trump was featured in. On December 2nd, at Trump's request, one of Trump's employees sent Emin Agalarov a copy of the article that Trump posted on Twitter with a handwritten note that referenced the possibility of a Trump Tower Moscow. The committee report includes a cover of the Moscow Times with a headline, "Donald Trump in new Emin video," a photograph of Donald Trump in black and white, and a note from Donald Trump to Emin in Sharpie, "Emin, you are the greatest!" Trump Tower Moscow? Donald. On December 4th, Trump Jr. wrote to Emin Agalarov, quote, "I am back and ready to go," close quote. Trump Jr. offered to have the Trump Organization draft a letter similar to the one suggested by Emin Agalarov as an initial step. A preliminary but formal agreement was signed on December 5, 2013. The signatories were Trump Jr. and Emin Agalarov. On December 6, 2013, Emin Agalarov sent the signed agreement to Trump Jr. and introduced him by mail to Irakli Kavaladze, who Agalarov said had worked on the Miss Universe pageant, had met Trump, and would be working on the Trump Tower deal for Crocus. Kavaladze told the committee that his primary interlocutor at the Trump Organization was Trump Jr., and that Emin and Aris Agalarov were both involved on the Crocus side. Kavaladze said that negotiations with the Trump Organization took place primarily by email and conference calls, and that he was against the joint project. Kavaladze told the committee that the joint project was designed as an incentive fee deal for a residential Trump Tower, and that Kavaladze was mostly focused on negotiating with the Trump Organization to lower its fees. Despite Kavaladze's concerns, negotiations advanced between the Crocus Group and the Trump Organization. Throughout December, Kavaladze and Trump Jr. negotiated by email regarding the Trump Organization's fee structure, and ultimately agreed to, quote, an expanded LOI, close quote, which Trump Jr. said he could get following the holidays. On January 13, 2014, Emin Agalarov and Trump Jr. met in person, along with Goldstone, at Nobu in New York City. Goldstone recalled that the Trump Tower project was discussed at this meeting and seemed to be moving forward. On January 14, 2014, Trump Jr. sent Emin Agalarov an unsigned expanded letter of intent regarding the proposed development of a, quote, super luxury, close quote, real estate project in Moscow. This letter and its attachment totaled 10 pages and was significantly more detailed than the original basic letter from December 5th. On January 15, 2014, Goldstone, Trump Jr., and other Trump Organization staff exchanged a number of emails regarding Ivanka Trump meeting with Agalarov in Moscow on February 4th for a, quote, site visit, close quote, and Emin Agalarov performing for an upcoming golf event at the Trump property in Doral, Florida. Kavaladze told the committee that he met Ivanka Trump briefly at the Crocus Group office in Moscow in February before she went with Emin Agalarov to visit the proposed site for a Trump Tower, which Kavaladze recalled was at the Crocus City complex on land already owned by the Agalarovs. Following Ivanka Trump's visit to Crocus on February 4th, she emailed Emin Agalarov to thank him for the tour. She wrote, quote, I am very excited about our collaboration and am confident that our families will enjoy great success together. We look forward to meeting with you again in the U.S. in March to review the details of the proposed Trump Tower with your architects, close quote. On February 11, 2014, at Rob Goldstone's request, Donald Trump Jr. tweeted to promote Emin Agalarov's album. On February 19, 2014, Donald Trump tweeted to promote an Emin Agalarov performance in Sochi, Russia, on The Today Show. Later that day, Agalarov wrote to Donald Trump Jr. and others, with Ivanka Trump copied, to thank them for supporting him. On March 5, 2014, Trump Jr. emailed Emin Agalarov, quote, do you have any free time this week? Would love to circle up on Moscow, close quote. Emin Agalarov replied that he would be flying to Miami the following day, and Trump Jr. suggested that they meet on March 7th after Agalarov arrived. On March 8, 2014, Emin Agalarov performed at the Trump golf event in Doral, Florida. He met with Trump, Ivanka Trump, and Trump Jr. while he was there. Trump Jr. planned to meet with Agalarov on March 10th. By late March, discussions between the Trump Organization, the Agalarovs, and architects hired by Crocus seemed to be progressing. Discussions included issues ranging from interior design to the square footage of residences, need for balconies, amenities, and the ratio of apartments to parking places. This level of detailed discussion continued through at least mid-July. The relationship between the Agalarovs and Trump also continued on other fronts. For example, emails from early July 2014 indicate that Trump was seeking Emin Agalarov's mailing address to thank him for a watch. The watch given to Trump was likely made by U-Boat, a company that Emin Agalarov has a relationship with. Eventually, progress on Trump Tower Moscow discussions began to slow. By late summer and early fall 2014, Tropia and Cavalazzi expressed frustration internally that the Trump organization was not being responsive to requests regarding the project. However, by mid-November 2014, the two sides had discussed design options and parcels of land. On November 14th, architects from the firm Jacobs Kling Stubbins, who were working on behalf of Crocus, emailed Trump Jr. and Florence Koo at the Trump Organization and copied Emin Agalarov, Cavalazzi, and others. The subject line of the email was, quote, Project, Crocus, Residential Complex, Parcel 11, Trump Tower, Moscow, close quote. In the body of the message, architect William McGee referenced previous discussions and wrote that, quote, Mr. Agalarov, close quote, had suggested that the, quote, Trump project, close quote, be moved to a different site along the river. The attached file was titled, quote, Trump Tower Concept Study, close quote. As of December 2014, Emin Agalarov continued to direct staff work on the project. On December 14, 2014, Jason Tropia emailed a Crocus employee writing, quote, Emin has asked me to review and study the Trump Org/Crocus contract for the residential tower, close quote. Tropia asked for a copy of the contract from the employee. In December 2014, Trump recorded a video in celebration of Emin Agalarov's 35th birthday. It is not clear that the negotiations with the Agalarovs for a Trump Tower Moscow ever formally ended. However, testimony from witnesses who were involved and other information indicates that communications regarding the project became increasingly infrequent over time without a specific cause identified. Trump Jr. recalled the project faded. He told the committee, quote, I don't even recall a specific. Hey guys, we're just not going to do it. It was just sort of clear that we're sort of going different directions and it probably wouldn't make sense for either side. So it just sort of went out, close quote. Goldstone told the committee that during an in-person meeting in Trump Tower between Emin Agalarov and Donald Trump, Agalarov said that Russia's economy had deteriorated and that, quote, we may have to reevaluate and relook, close quote. Trump Jr. was unsure, but estimated that by the end of 2014, it was clear that the project had lost momentum and wouldn't be moving forward. Emin Agalarov said in an April 2016 interview that the negotiations, quote, kind of faded away because I think he, Trump, is busy with other things. We are busy with other things. It's not something that we decided like, okay, let's stop. It wasn't at that point. Teams are still in correspondence. It's a work in progress, close quote. When pressed, Emin Agalarov acknowledged that, quote, since he, Trump, started running for the presidency, I don't think we've had a conversation about Trump Tower, close quote. Nevertheless, in the same interview, Aras Agalarov stated that Crocus was still, quote, the right place for a Trump Tower, close quote. Continuing communications. Throughout 2015 and 2016, Aras Agalarov and Emin Agalarov remained in regular contact with Trump and Trump Jr., often through Graff and Goldstone or other staff working for the Agalarovs. The contact ranged from personal to substantive to logistical and included written correspondence, gifts, and in-person meetings. Goldstone estimated that in addition to in-person meetings between Trump and Emin Agalarov in Las Vegas, Moscow, and Doral, they met 3 or 4 times in Trump Tower for visits when Emin Agalarov was in New York. Goldstone characterized these meetings in Trump Tower as personal rather than substantive or business-oriented. One of these meetings occurred on May 20, 2015. That meeting was likely the last of Emin Agalarov's personal meetings with Trump at Trump Tower. Emin Agalarov told the committee that Trump discussed running for president at the time, but that Trump said he did not know if he would run. Goldstone had a different recollection. He told the committee that the final meeting between Trump and Agalarov, quote, was approximately 6 weeks before he, Trump, was due to announce that he was going to run for president. The reason is, on the way out, he said, I'm going to be running for president, you know, so next time you won't be coming here. You'll be coming to see me at the White House. That's why I specifically remember that, close quote. Recalling his final meeting with Trump, Emin Agalarov has said, quote, "The last conversation before he ran that he and I had, he was criticizing the United States government for not being able to be friends with Russia. He keeps underlining that he thinks that President Putin is a strong leader, and he thinks America, instead of fighting Russia, should bond and be friends and have common goals with Russia." Close quote.